Hello, everybody, and welcome to the English Right Now podcast. With me, your host, it's Roy, your British English teacher. And in this episode of the podcast, we're going to be talking about New Year's traditions across the UK, but mainly, of course, in England, which is where I'm from. And of course, my special guest here, again, it's Rob, joining me to talk about New Year's traditions, how he brings in or rings in the new year. It is Rob. So, New Year's.
Hello, hi Roy, hi everyone.
Hello, welcome again. So, New Year. Do you like New Year? Let's start strong. Do you like New Year?
Not really. After all the fun of Christmas, all the celebrations and enjoyment, New Year is a bit sobering. You know, it's a bit like having a hangover, isn't it? After lots of drinking.
It's interesting that you use that word sobering, because to sober up basically literally means to sort of no longer have alcohol in the system. But we often use sobering to mean like it's something that brings us back down to a certain level. Or another way we say it, brings us back down to earth. In other words, we're on this high, we're on this like really elated period, and suddenly it's quite back to normal. And I would agree. So I think New Year is quite celebrated, but it's not as celebrated as Christmas. It's certainly not as popular amongst my friends as Christmas.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I do like New Year's Eve, which is obviously the evening before New Year's Day, the last evening of the year, is a good celebration. And, a party or maybe going out is good fun. It's just, what's coming next. New Year's Day, 1st of January, it's cold, it's dark, and it's kind of back to the same routine. So, yeah, the actual evening, New Year's Eve, is okay, but it's just what follows that makes it, spoils it.
I think for me as well, here's a great expression. It's a bit of a damp squib. So a damp squib is something that's not really very exciting. It doesn't really do anything. And quite often I find New Year's Eve itself to be a bit of a damp squib. In other words, it's a bit of a letdown. It's a bit of a disappointment at times. And I'm going to tell you a story of mine a little bit later on. But traditionally, what do you tend to do on New Year's Eve?
We tend to go to somebody's house. Somebody usually hosts a party.
Anybody, or just a friend? Or
anybody, preferably somebody we know. Friends usually.
We
go to the house.
Yeah,
we go to someone's house, and we have a good time. And we usually see midnight in by watching the TV and seeing midnight strike on the clock of Big Ben, our big famous clock here in London. But apart from that, it's a celebration. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
This is, well, to be honest, yeah. I mean, quite often before I was married, or definitely before I had children, we'd go to the pub and we'd kind of ring in the new year at the pub with friends. But I think as you get a bit more, as you've got kids, I mean, my son, he's going to find it very difficult to get anywhere near midnight unless he's had too much sugar. And so therefore you can't really go out like you once did, or you have to find a babysitter. So these days I kind of prefer, while he's a bit younger, and I think it is very much an age thing when you're thinking about your kids on this one. We tend to maybe bring people over to ours, maybe my parents, a few very close friends, or it's just us sometimes in front of the telly. Telly is a beautiful slang term for television. In front of the telly, watching the fireworks on TV. It's it sounds a bit depressing, doesn't it? But we watch the fireworks, which is a traditional part, and then we count down to midnight, 10, 9, 8, and we get all the Happy New Year. And then, if there's a bunch of friends, it can be quite good. Usually people are quite tipsy by midnight. Definitely.
Yes.
Although that can be, like you say, the sobering can be both literal and figurative, because the next day you have your kid waking up.
Yeah. I know. You're quite right about New Year's of past, before children, definitely going down the pub. Or sometimes we would go away, a group of us would go away, rent a cottage, maybe by the sea or something like that, where we could just have a good time. And then New Year's Day, we get up, go for a walk on the beach or go for a walk up a hill somewhere. They were the old days when we were younger, but now it's a little bit tamer, I guess. A bit more civilized.
Tamer, that's a good word. More civilized, tamer, more sort of controlled, less wild.
But the most important thing, just to say, Roy, I like my traditions, and I do, regardless of whose house I'm at or what I'm doing, I do like to see midnight, and I like to see the countdown, as you say, which is usually on the TV. But I did, again, going back to my younger days. Oh, we're reminiscing here, aren't we? Looking back at my younger days, there are a few occasions where I went up to the centre of London, because the centre of London was the place to meet in Trafalgar Square. And everyone would cram into Trafalgar Square. No reason, really, other than that it was midnight, and everyone would gather together and go "Happy New Year" and have a few drinks. And
I must admit that was one of my most that I really enjoyed. I did it in London, I think at least once, maybe twice, and to see it on the clock tower when Big Ben kind of rings in New Year and the fireworks are going off is an incredible experience. However, I must admit, there are so many people there, and you are literally, you can't move, and you get as close as you possibly can to the front to see everything. And I always wonder what happens if somebody needs a toilet, the toilet at like 11:20. They're like, no, gosh, it must be traumatizing. But I think New Year, basically in the UK, I would summarize what we're saying, and I'd say it's still quite cool. There's often a party. And if you go to pubs and clubs, it's tending to be younger single people or younger people without kids. And, New Year itself is champagne at midnight, maybe a glass of champagne or a glass of Prosecco if you don't have any champagne to hand. Fireworks going off, and then the countdown. And that's about it. But there is something that we tend to do in the UK at midnight. We sing, don't we?
We do sing an old-fashioned song. Yes. Do you know the words?
No.
Well, what's it called? What's it called, first of all?
Auld Lang Syne. So it's Auld Lang Syne. And I think most people at about midnight, Auld Lang Syne, it's basically a song that was traditionally sang as the clocks turned midnight. So it was sang on the stroke of midnight. And it's traditionally sang as the clocks turn midnight, and I believe it comes from an old poem by Robert Burns.
Yeah, it's certainly a Scottish song from Scotland. Yes,
translates as something like "Time's Gone By," and the thing is, I think a lot of people do "For Auld Lang Syne, my dear," but most people they kind of halfway through they're like, because I think a lot of people don't. It's a little bit like the national anthem. A lot of people don't. I know the national anthem, but Auld Lang Syne. I know most of the words, but I tend to kind of just go with the flow. Go with the flow is basically follow other people's lead. That kind of idea.
Yeah. Copy everybody else. But something to do with, well, old acquaintances being forgot.
Old acquaintance be forgot.
Should you forget your old acquaintances, which are like your old
I don't think so.
You
know what we're going to do? What we're going to do is we're going to, in the comments below, write the words to Auld Lang Syne. We can try and bring them up. Auld Lang Syne. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? ? Should old acquaintance be forgot and Auld Lang Syne? For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne. This is the bit we know. We'll take a cup of kindness yet for Auld Lang Syne. And surely you'll buy I don't know half of these words. And surely you'll buy your pint cup, and surely I'll be buy mine. Is that correct? I mean, like, honestly, the words to Auld Lang Syne, we're really showing our cultural knowledge here of Scottish songs, aren't we? So, but technically, a lot of people just sing them. I think they sing the chorus. For Auld Lang Syne, my dear. Yeah. And they do start up.
You hold arms, don't you? You dance to this as well.
You either hold arms or sort of cross arms, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, yeah. You dance
Link
around,
arms.
yeah.
But I'm really intrigued.
I get quite emotional singing and hearing that song, though, even though I don't really know what it means. But it's just that, that it marks that sort of end of the year.
It's a song about, like, the passing of time, and I think it translates as "time's gone by" or "times go by," that kind of idea. And it's this idea that we are sort of saying goodbye to the old and in with the new. And I find it ironic that, maybe I now need to learn the words to this song. I wonder, let us know in the comments below if you are, like, from this country. Do you know all of the words to Auld Lang Syne? Because this would be fantastic to know. Somebody here, like properly knows all of the words. I'd be very impressed. But we all sing it, then we get drunk. But this is my bugbear. So bugbear is kind of a minor annoyance. This is my bugbear with New Year. So if you go to a pub or a club in this country, you tend to get to midnight, and then you have like everyone's Happy New Year, Happy New Year. The people are kissing. There's the glasses of champagne. Everybody's cheers, old lang syne, my dear, and everyone's getting really, really excited. And in pubs, about 10 minutes later, they close. And then at about 12, or maybe just a bit after, you're kind of just on the streets, like, oh, okay, that's it for another year. We're done. And I find that a bit. I don't know. I find that such an anticlimax, because I've been to. I mean, it may be 12:30 because we have closing times often in pubs in the UK, and it's just such a kind of a build up, and then it's just done in a minute. In a second, in fact, the stroke of midnight comes. Everyone's hey! And it's the highest moment of the night. Everybody's celebrating, singing, kissing, popping champagne, and then it's like bye. Obviously, if you're at somebody's party, it can go until 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, depending on how much stamina you've got. But when you go to pubs and clubs, I find it a little bit. I'm sure there are some pubs or clubs out there, but I'm going to tell you.
I think there are nightclubs that go on all night, but the pubs, close. Going back to my original words, so it's quite sobering. You've been drinking all night, and then you're thrown out on the street into the cold, dark streets. You can't drink anymore.
I'm going to tell you a little story. I'm going to tell you a little story about one of my New Year's experiences. Some of the best New Year's I've ever had have been very ad hoc. In other words, they've been unplanned. So I remember there was one that I went to with a bunch of friends to the beach, and we had a party at midnight on Portsmouth Beach. And that was really cool. I was staying with a friend. And obviously, Portsmouth is not far away from me. I live on the Isle of Wight, which is really important to the story. And so that one was a really good New Year's. And then I've had a few others like that where you go, oh, come around mine. Oh, brilliant. Okay. And they're really brilliant. But the New Year's I want to talk about, I can't remember how old. I must have been about 20, 21, maybe around there. And we live on the Isle of Wight. And the Isle of Wight basically is an island off the south coast, if you're not sure. And my best friend, he said to me, let's go to Portsmouth for a night out. So there are no bridges. There's no way to connect to the mainland other than by boat. So we got on a boat at around 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and we got to Portsmouth 8:30. By the time we got to the city centre, it was like 9 o'clock. It might have been 10 o'clock. And we were really cold. We was awful. Hadn't had anything to drink. We were completely sober, stone cold sober, which is a way of saying absolutely sober. And we were going to all these pubs to go, sorry, mate, we're full. Sorry, mate, we're full. Sorry, mate, we're full. Oh, you need a ticket. You need to buy a ticket in advance. And we were like, oh, God, I thought this was going to be more fun. And anyway, we finally found a pub. And we went in and we were so grateful. I think it was about 11 o'clock. I remember we ordered one drink because the bars were full and you couldn't really get to the bar to order a drink. And we ordered one drink, we had a drink, and then we celebrated. Everyone's, hey, Happy New Year! Everyone's singing the Old Lang Syne, and everyone's cheering, and me and my mate are there finally getting a bit warmer with a drink, a single drink. And then they said, okay, everybody, it's time to leave. The lights came up, and we were like, what? We've only been here for about an hour. We paid like £20 to get in for half an hour. I had no idea it was going to close at like 10 past midnight or 5 past midnight, whatever. Anyway, so we said, well, what do we do now? There was nothing open. So we walked back to the boat, only to find that there were no boats until 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning. So we were like, what are we going to do for 8 hours? Well, for 8 hours, we said, can we sit in the waiting room? No, it's closed. And I was like, oh my goodness, it was freezing. It was really, really cold. And we ended up standing in a doorway, me and my best friend, on midnight, hugging each other, just trying to keep warm for around 8 hours. And finally we got on a boat. And it was like, that is probably not even my worst New Year's story. So
night to remember.
But after that, I was just like, what's the point? I might as well just go to my parents.
Yeah, yes. Sometimes, yes.
But yeah, so yeah, that's the thing. So like I say, it's a bit of a damn squib. But one thing I was going to talk about. So we've talked about what we actually do and how it's not as big as Christmas. It's definitely not as big as Christmas
No.
in the UK. Christmas, I think it basically comes too quickly afterwards. Everyone's like just on the 26th, 27th, starting to feel a bit more normal after Christmas. And there's still a lot of food left over. That's quite often bleeding into New Year. You're still eating the same chicken or turkey that you had on Christmas Day.
Yes.
The leftovers, the stuff that's left over. And I think it's just all a bit, it's not as exciting because we've had several days of the same food and same people because everybody's off work. Well, not everybody, but quite often people are off work. So you've spent maybe 7 or 8 days with your family. And by this time, you're probably a bit like, oh, I remember why I moved out in the first place. And yeah, but there are some traditions. So apart from I was going to say popcorn, not popcorn, the popping of champagne at midnight, at the stroke of midnight when you go bong, apart from the fireworks and apart from the Old Lang Syne, there's not many traditions that people still do everywhere, but there are some older traditions. Some people still carry over. Go on, you know what I'm talking about.
Are we talking about first footing?
We are.
Yeah,
we are.
First footing. So going round to somebody's house after midnight, traditionally with a lump of coal, I believe, in certain parts of the UK.
Well, this is the really interesting thing. So the tradition itself, some people say it's a tradition in Scotland, some people say it's a tradition in North Lancashire or Lancashire.
Yeah.
My parents actually do first footing. So they're from Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. And they actually do it. And it's the idea. So what happens with my parents is my father leaves the house and then goes outside and then he knocks on the door and then my mum lets him in the house to bring in the new year. And it's a bit weird, isn't it? It's a bit, I love it. It's a fantastic, you love traditions. I love traditions as well. But like the idea of going out into the freezing cold for about 20 seconds to make somebody else come and open the door to let the heat out again is probably why this stopped being so
I've never
popular.
done it. Never done it myself. But I
No,
like the idea of it.
So apparently it should be a dark-haired person.
Right.
A dark-haired person. Because apparently this tradition is rooted in kind of it relates to the Vikings as well. It was around the time of the Vikings, so the dark-haired person was seen as lucky. Apparently, that's where some people say this comes from. Although whether or not that's true, because Vikings traditionally would have been either red or blonde-haired, and yeah, so it was a dark-haired person, and they would arrive carrying a piece of coal, bread, money, or something like greenery, and the coal was made, and it was all for good luck. And the coal was to ensure that your house remains warm, bread so that everybody has food, and money so that you always have enough money, and greenery so you have a long life. And apparently some people would also throw a pan of dust out of the house, out the back door, to let out the old year. So there's lots of different sort of traditions. My parents only go outside and come back in. Some people, I think my father brings in salt, which is also seen as good luck in certain parts of the country. But this is the thing: these traditions, they kind of mutate over time, which is why, like, our generation, we don't really know what these are. I mean, we've heard of them, and probably our kids will never know what they are because it's a dying tradition, if not dead already, and only kind of our parents' generation will do it.
Maybe there's less community spirit these days. We all kind of live in our own isolated houses and stuff. Where in the old days, there's very much more people going out and seeing their neighbours and
well, you had the midnight feast. I mean, in my parents' thing, they never went to other people's houses. They only left their own house to go back into their own house. So maybe they were bringing an element of antisocial nature to the tradition. But you're absolutely right. In the past, we had things like the midnight feast, which is where people would go to people's houses to eat at midnight, and that's we're talking hundreds of years ago. But yeah, and apparently that's why you have the term midnight feast, which is like eat a lot in the middle of the night. And it was actually a thing where we would sit down for a dinner or a banquet in the middle of the night, and that is another dead tradition that's dead. I mean, that's gone. Another tradition I've heard of is in Yorkshire. And I don't know, I do know part of the tradition, but I don't know the full tradition. So apparently this is what I've heard. Whether I'd love to know whether this is actually true. I've never experienced it myself, but traditionally, people in Yorkshire would shout "Black Rabbit, Black Rabbit, Black Rabbit" as the last year went through, and "White Rabbits, White Rabbits, White Rabbits" to bring in the new year. Now, the only so I've never heard that. Have you ever heard that?
No, and my wife is from Yorkshire, and she's never shouted anything about rabbits to me at all. So that's one I'm not aware of.
You haven't lived, and
No.
but the thing is, a lot of people. So my parents, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire are not far from Yorkshire, South Yorkshire,
Yeah.
and they say white rabbits at the start of a new month. So on the first of the month, any month, they will say white rabbits. So I wonder if that's a kind of hangover. So if my mum looks down and says, "Oh, it's March the 1st, white rabbits," she will say it first for good luck, because the white rabbit is seen traditionally as good luck. I always find that funny about the rabbit's foot. The rabbit's foot.
Yes.
So a rabbit's foot is seen as good luck. And I always think, well, not for the rabbit.
Not for the rabbit.
That rabbit's got 3 feet left. So there you go. But
the rabbit's not laughing. No.
One tradition, I don't know about this one. Have you heard about washing clothes?
For New Year?
It's not a tradition, actually. It's a superstition. So superstition is when we believe something, we avoid doing something, or we do something to prevent bad luck, basically, or to bring in good luck. It's a superstition. So my mum has this superstition. It's about washing over New Year. And there are certain, again, deviations and varieties of this tradition. But the most standard one is don't wash clothes on New Year's Eve. Don't have your washing on hanging out over New Year. Don't bring your washing into the new year, because it's kind of like saying that you're bringing the bad luck in, or you're washing away the good luck. That's what I've heard. But I think it goes further for some people. Some people say that if you wash clothes, if you clean on either New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, you wash away a person. In other words, you invite death into the house. And that's why it's a very morbid superstition.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
It's very depressing.
Yeah.
But it's not specifically about washing clothes on New Year's Day, although some people say don't do any cleaning on New Year's Day. I'm happy with that. I don't anything to avoid cleaning after a night like that. But some people say don't clean, don't do anything. But certainly this idea with my mother is do not have washing hanging up over the new year, because it's really bad luck. It's bringing in the bad luck. You've never heard of that?
No.
Oh.
No.
Yeah, but this is a tradition. So my wife, who is Brazilian, last year she tried to do some washing on New Year's Eve, and my mum was like, no, you're gonna kill us all. Really dramatic. And I was like, Mum, oh dear. But like, my wife understood, put it down. Because in Brazil they have their own traditions as well. Of course they do. There's something related to the color of clothes that you wear brings in. I'm not entirely sure. I can never remember if white is peace or money or something. I don't know. But depending on the color that you wear is what you'll get next year. And I quite like that. And I think in Spain they eat grapes at midnight. And what I'm trying to allude to here is I'd love to know, the people that are listening, the people that are watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify or wherever we are, I would love to know what your traditions are. I would love to know, what the New Year traditions are in your country. And what's really intriguing, as you've probably seen with Rob and I right now, is that traditions that I have don't necessarily, go across the country. In Scotland, they have Old Lang Syne, they have Hogmanay. We haven't even talked about Hogmanay, which is a massive do.
Big thing in Scotland.
Hogmanay is more of a 3-day affair. Have you ever been for Hogmanay?
Yeah, I went to Edinburgh a few years ago. They have a big Hogmanay celebration. We had a torchlight procession down the main street. There was live music. Of course, there were fireworks. Big fun fair in the middle of the city. It's an amazing event now in Edinburgh, particularly. But obviously elsewhere around Scotland as well, they do lots of kind of, particularly involving fire and burning fire or swinging fireballs, all these kind of things to bring in the new year. I think it again goes back to probably Viking traditions. It's not religious, is it? It's more of a
possibly pagan. But I mean, I've never experienced it because I live as far down south as you can get in the UK, pretty much. One
Yeah.
thing before we wrap this one up, I was going to say, you talked about the famous clock in London, the
Big
famous
Ben.
clock that rings. Da, 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 da. But did you know that Big Ben isn't technically the real name of that clock?
No, that is the name of the bell itself, isn't it?
Yes, it's the name of the. I often see it referred to as the bell inside, the grand bell inside. But the actual name is Elizabeth Tower.
Yeah.
The name of the actual structure that you see with the face on it. But most people do refer to it as Big Ben, and Big Ben has now become the actual sort of go-to name of it. But the technical
More
name
fun
of that
name, isn't
tower
it?
is Elizabeth.
It's a more fun name, isn't it? Calling it Big
I
Ben
think so.
than the
I
Elizabeth
do.
Tower.
It was original. Elizabeth Tower is a very cool name. It's obviously named after Elizabeth II for one of her sort of jubilees or something like this. I think it was a jubilee. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But originally, before it became the name of Elizabeth Tower, it was the rather blandly named Clock Tower. The Clock Tower. It's very literal, isn't it? They went, "What's that?" No, it's a tower. What does it do? Well, it's got a clock on it. What should we call it? The Clock Tower. And then somebody must have gone, "What's that?" Well, that's a bell. Big Ben. Done. We'll call it Big Ben. I do think it's a fun name, but nobody.
I've also heard, Roy, that Big Ben, the name Big Ben, the name of the bell, was just named after somebody who worked on the tower. And they were saying, "What should we call the
Really?
bell?" And it was kind of, the Big Ben over there. We'll call it Big Ben. Now, again, don't quote me on that, but that's a story I've heard.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic story. I think there's a whole YouTube lesson ready to happen about talking about Big Ben, or because if you go to London as well and go, "I want to see Elizabeth Tower," everybody's going to go, "Where?"
Yeah,
And that's the funny thing, isn't it? Because it's actually replaced. It's actually fully replaced the word to the point where people don't even know that it's called Elizabeth Tower Clock Tower. It's just a fun bit of trivia that I thought I'd throw in there. If anybody comes to the UK and has a pub quiz, they can go, "Oh, I know the real name. I was listening to Rob and Roy talking about Big Ben, or is it not called Big Ben?" And it's the same. I find this fascinating. Maybe at some point, like almost, it's like where brands sort of replace the name of something, so it became so synonymous that it was called Big Ben after time. And like I say, nobody will ever know where Elizabeth Tower is. It would take a real kind of person like me to go, "Well, I know." But there you go.
So anyway, we look to that tower, as you say, for midnight, 12 o'clock. Then usually, London puts on a fantastic firework display, which, as you say, we watch on TV now, don't we? In fact, have you noticed that a lot of the capital cities around the world now try and compete for the best firework display? Somebody else is bigger and better, and they want to.
Yeah, I did see something about the Christmas tree this year as well. How ours is a bit in Trafalgar Square. Ours is maybe not as extravagant as some others. In London this year, you can find out for yourself if you watch a video there. But I do think for New Year and of course it's not just fireworks, it's drones as well. You have these electric drone shows, which is something I think even 5 years ago would have been completely just out of this world science fiction kind of thing, like maybe 10 years ago. And now you've got these thousands of little drones shining electric light. And I suppose it saves, because one of my things, and I'll wrap this on, one of my things about fireworks is that it upsets my dog. Really, it terrifies her. New Year that's another reason I often stay in, because of my dog. Because I have a dog and she gets terrified of fireworks, and I don't think it's fair for me to be out partying while my dog is there. And I would never leave her on her own anyway, so I'd have to put her with, and I think that drones are such a step up in that sense. I do like that. I do like that. But when I think about children's ears and them all sat there like this, and dogs panicking, I do feel a bit, maybe I'm enjoying it at the expense of somebody else's joy. So I really appreciate these drones. You can tell I really think about it. I'm a real dog person.
Drone displays are definitely spectacular now. I say some of the images that they can draw in the sky is incredible. But obviously that's midnight and we have a good time, and then we come to New Year's Day. And I just wanted to mention about New Year's resolutions.
Oh my goodness! How do we get to a 30-minute podcast without mentioning New Year's resolutions? Of course, and I think these are quite common across the world. I think these are absolutely quite sort of, a lot of people do them, but it's like a kind of promise that we make to ourselves that we're going to do, and a resolution, New Year's resolution. It's this promise, something that we promise ourselves that we're going to either start doing, improve on, and usually we break them within about a week.
Yes.
I'm going to go to the gym this year every day, and about 3 days later, you're like, well, maybe not every day, because of course I think gyms, they usually have their promotions on now, don't they? I think it's a very common one. And then we have dry January. A lot of people where they don't drink. Is it dry January?
Yeah, that's right. Dry January. Yeah,
dry January where people don't drink alcohol for a month. They go to the gym. They get fit. They get healthy. They destroy their lives again in February. It's fine. What are your New Year's resolutions this year?
Well, it's the same every year, Roy. Get fit, eat more healthily. And as you say, after about a week, I think, oh, this is boring. I'm going to eat more, do less exercise, and I'll do it again next year. So usually they're the usual common ones.
Yeah, you stole mine as well. To be honest, I think you just read my lines of the script because, mine's get fit, eat healthily, probably go away a bit more. Go to Scotland.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Go to Scotland for Hogmanay.
Book your holiday for next New Year, okay?
I will have to. But on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me today. What a lovely chat. And I will probably, no doubt, see you next week. So
yes, Roy.
Have a great one. And thank you very much for talking about that. And if you've got any questions, if anybody's got any questions down below for either of us, or any questions about traditions, culture, or anything you'd like us to discuss in this podcast, please do let us know. But from us, I'm just going to say thank you very much for joining us, you wonderful people. And from Rob,
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Oh, yeah. Happy New Year. Yay. Have a good one.
Yeah. Bye.